This is live. See it there.
Live, okay. Good morning, everyone. This is the House Human Services Committee meeting here in room 11. Thank you to everyone for being here. And thank you to the witnesses who have made time to be here today as well. We're going to be concentrating on two main areas. The first being food insecurity and the second being housing insecurity. And so we have been, as probably most people have seen in the news lately, the legislature and the administration have been working hard to try to address the immediate needs of Vermonters around food insecurity. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about that. And we are also going to hear from community providers about what they are seeing in the community in terms of the impact. And finally, we will take a break. But the other thing that we are going to take a particular look at is the impact on Afghani refugees and their access to food given their special immigration visa status. So with that, I would love to welcome Miranda and Leslie up. And Bart, I know that you're not on the agenda, but I know people are going to have some questions maybe when we get to the Afghani stuff. So just want to give you a heads up, okay? Thank you. Welcome to both of you.
Morning, thank you.
And the first thing I want to say is thank you for all of the work that you have been doing to make sure that Vermonters have access to food despite what's happening in Washington right now. And we have appreciated working together on trying to ensure that this emergency state-funded benefit is as seamless as possible to Vermonters, and really appreciate all of the work that I know is taken behind the scenes with you folks to make that happen. So I just wanted to express the state's gratitude.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna, for the record, Miranda Gray, I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Economic Services Division.
Good morning, Leslie Wisdom. I'm the Food and Nutrition Program Director with Economic Services.
And then logistically, would you like me to share a PowerPoint?
Yes, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Right there.
And folks, we have documents on our committee's webpage for you to look at as well. Do we have your document on our webpage? I don't think so,
I think there was.
but we will
Yes,
eventually.
you for sure will.
Okay.
We're in the queue and to you.
Okay.
So yeah, now that I've worked through the logistics, thank you for having us. And for the appreciation. It has been a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes. And we have great partners within the Agency of Digital Services as we've really needed their help to be able to do what has been federally mandated. For the flow, we thought we would talk to you because I think it just kind of gives you a sequence of like where we have been. HR 1 that was implemented on July 4th. So we were going to talk with you about that, which leads into, I think, your request perhaps.
Can I interrupt just for a moment? I just realized I'm sort of like out of practice. We're not going to go through all the people in the room, but we should do introductions around the room because I like, because we have a special invited guest. As I was looking around the room, I'm thinking like people are going to think Representative Blumley is part of Human Services. And while that would be lovely,
Well, it's my fondest aspiration.
I have invited her. She has been very interested in this and following along all of these issues. So we'll just do a quick around the room. So let's start with you, Representative Blumley.
Yeah, it's Blumley from Burlington, and I sit on the appropriations committee.
Hi, good morning. I represent Rockland City.
Deb Bishop, Colchester's Chittenden 20 District.
Ann Donahue, Northfield and Berlin.
Teresa Wood, Bolton, Beals Gore, Huntington, and Waterbury.
Ray Garofano, Essex and Essex Junction.
Good morning, Dan Noyes. I represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
Hello, Esme Cole, Hartford.
Jubilee McGill, Bridport, Middlebury, New Haven, and Woodbridge.
For this Debbie, Westford, East Milton.
Good morning, Representative Nielsen. I represent Brandon Forest.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption. I was a little out of practice with the whole committee here.
Not a problem. We're getting us warmed up. Yes, so we thought we would share the changes that we had to implement through HR1 because we have been very busy this summer doing that. Then get into the guidance that we received from USDA about the November benefits, and then kind of end with what is good news, but still a lot of work to come. The emergency board meeting that we held yesterday and what was passed there.
Sounds good.
Perfect. All right, and I'm also a little out of practice with Zoom, so if I forget to move slides, please let me know. So as I mentioned, HR1 was enacted in July of 2025, so it was on July 4th. And there were significant changes. And I will say, I think we're going to be talking about this more than once. We've had a couple of months to be absorbing all this, but it's significant. And so any questions, please let us know. There is also a legislative report that we submitted that gets a nice summary of it. And I will say it's kind of at that moment in time because things continue to evolve. But it does give some nice background. And that is also on the website. We have changes. So we had some changes that we needed to implement for October 1st. Some were supposed to be sooner. You could do that as a state, but things take a little bit of time. And then changes that will go on for the next 2 years and potentially into the future. And you'll understand what I mean more about that when we get into some of these slides. There's just some potential dominoes that can happen into the future. And as a state, we've really been trying to make sure that we're complying with the federal law because it has such significant impacts to those that are on SNAP. So happy to have conversations about that as well, but there are pretty significant implications. And one of the things that Vermont was able to do because of getting so much of HR1 in place timely is that we have a hold harmless month that was this month, October. And so if states hadn't quite gotten something right, you weren't going to get an error for that. And so that was really key for us to be able to see like, okay, did we not quite get something right? Because we can fix that. And we are fortunate that we are one of the states that were able to get things into place.
Is there a way for you to, because we don't have this on our website yet, is there a way for you to make the print a little bit bigger for some of our folks who can't quite in the audience?
That bigger on your side? I know, I'm like.
Yeah, maybe.
A little.
Much smaller. Get all of it.
I know there seems to be no in between.
In between, yeah.
Hopefully we will be able to get
Can you
it.
have your folks send it to us?
It should be routing.
Okay,
Yes, hopefully as I'm talking, it will.
it will appear. Okay, all right. Laura, you can just interrupt us and let us know when that happens.
Maybe even Monica, if you don't mind sending it to Lori directly. Okay, thank you, Brendan. Okay. Okay, so yeah, because now.
Okay, that's easier to see. Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's a little funky on my side. That's all right. I got paper too. All right. So we are going to try to break this out, although the flow is a little, we're trying to find the flow that works best. So effective next October, a significant change for SNAP now is that the administrative match has changed. Currently it's 50-50. Next year, it goes from 50 to 25% federal and 75% state. So we are taking on an additional 25% of the cost as a state.
And how much is that?
So that's an approximate $8 million extra a year. And that's kind of like, I would say, the base, understanding that we have, that could be impacted in other ways. This applies to administrative costs of the outreach programs as well. It does not apply to summer EBT. So as you might remember, we implemented that program just last summer. Gosh, that feels like it was, or SNAP and employment and training funds. So those are kind of carve outs. So that's a big change and one that we'll be talking about as we get into the legislative session. So the next big change that also was implemented through HR1 is how important our payment error rate is. So right now, we have when we received this, we had an error rate of 5.13%. So we're below the 6%. Being below the 6% is the most ideal. When you go above 6%, then there will start being a state match of 5%, 10%, up to 15% for states. So this is the part of where I was saying, like, we're trying really hard to make sure that we are doing things correctly, that we're watching our errors. It is still a little bit tricky. The errors are both those that we might make as the state, but it is also if clients fail to report information to us. So it's not necessarily something that we completely control, but we are trying to, we've done a lot of trainings for our staff. We will continue to do trainings. How can we help educate sponsors on when they need to report things to us? But we're just there, and as I think we're at 5.93% now. So it's a cumulative, and there's a lag. So we just reviewed May, and that's where we're at now as a state. This becomes really important. So for state fiscal year 28, states will have the option of looking at either state fiscal year 25 or 26. So we're still wrapping up the 5.93% as a part of state fiscal 25. We just entered federal fiscal year 26. And so that was part of like having this month, October, being held harmless was really important. We want to start off as strong as we can and keep our error rate below the 6%.
What are the things that normally cause errors? The types of things?
Yeah, so payment errors are essentially error dollars that we either overpaid or underpaid a household that they were entitled to. So when a sample is pulled from our caseload, it's reviewed thoroughly, and any dollar error over or under contributes to that payment error rate. So it's a calculation that's cumulative over all of the months of the federal fiscal year. And I can share that there's 53 states and territories that run the SNAP program. There are only 9. We're one of 9 who have an error rate under 6% right now. So 44 already know that they're likely, if they don't reduce their payment error rate very soon for 25 and 26 going forward, then they will have significant financial liability.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Donovan.
That's, for instance, the first from 6 to 7%. That 5% is not added to administrative. That's the cost of the benefits themselves.
Yes.
So what, do we have an estimate of what that impact would be if we didn't meet it?
So that gets to, yep. No,
Great
hold on.
question.
If it's a future, if it's a future slide.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Cole.
Thank you. I'm wondering which office is pulling those samples and how often are they doing that? And
Sure. We have every state and territory that runs SNAP is required to have an Office of Quality Control. So those are state employees that are obligated to fulfill the federal mission of reviewing cases. There's multi-layers. The state quality control reviewers send their results up to the federal quality control reviewers who subsample a sample of their cases and say whether they agree or disagree. And we get monthly unofficial reports every month. And at the end of the federal fiscal year, all of those results are certified. And that is also the state quality control reviewers are required to complete a really high percentage of cases, 98%. If they don't complete that percentage, that also impacts our payment error rate.
I'm not sure I understand what you said. Complete 98%. Does that mean that they have to, it's not a sample, that they have to review 98% of all recipients?
So the sample that they pull, they need to complete that sample, but we're not always able. So they get in contact with the 3 Squares Vermont household. Those households don't always want to interact with the quality control review process. And so they work hard to seek other information directly from sources, for example, from landlords to verify rent or other.
So they have to complete 98% of their sample.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Are these new positions?
No, those have been around for a long time.
Probably when we get to the budget, we'll probably want a deeper breakdown of really what makes up that administrative cost, since, FY 27, we're going to have to be bearing a higher rate of that. Go ahead, Representative Bishop.
Thank you. So for FY twenty-seven, if I understood correctly, we could look back to state FY 25 or 26 to pick the more favorable one and keep our error rate hopefully below 6%. For fiscal year 25, the May number you've given us is 5.93. Is that a snapshot of 1 month, and was the 1 month before 5.13? How, or is it cumulative? So I guess I'm trying to figure out how close are we for the year versus a 1 month snapshot of being at 6%?
So the 5.13 is our overall federal fiscal year 24. So that's for the entire year. The 5.93 is a cumulative, so through May.
Okay,
So it goes October through September. So we're at 5.93% now and still have a couple more months in the last year's federal fiscal year to get through to see where we're gonna land. We're hoping, because there is some ebb and flow, because as Leslie had mentioned, right, there's a number of factors in how big the payment error rate is impacts that percentage.
Right.
And so we remain hopeful that we'll stay under the 6%, but we won't know for a couple more months.
and I'm sorry, and maybe you just answered it with that last phrase. I'm not sure I understood. Federal or state fiscal year? Federal. Okay, thank you.
So, and Rep. Dunn, to your question, if we had a 5% state match, that would cost the state about $7.5 million annually.
Thank you.
I'm sure that I got everything here. So this October 1st, SNAP education funding was removed. That was one of the things in HR 1. And so, and this was really, it was money that we passed through to the health department. And then they passed that out to, other partners. And this was, it was something, I mean, that happened relatively quick. And that we didn't really have much opportunity to look into what might be done there.
How much money was that?
It was just under $500,000 annually.
And I'm presuming that that went out to community partners of some sort. Okay, so that impact was really on community providers and the people who access those education resources through those providers.
Madam Chair, it's
Yes.
posted now.
Ah,
It's posted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So folks, you can refresh your computers and the presentation will show up. Thank you.
So effective July 1st, that were implemented for October 1st. So part of the law said that we had to remove some exemptions. And that included for those that were experiencing homelessness, veterans, and youth who had aged out of foster care. It's also changed the following exemptions. It limited the child in home exemption to a child under the age of 14. It used to be 18. And it expanded the age range for those who are subject to work requirements. And that was 18 to 64. And now it is for 18 years of age to 54 years of age. So this impacted what people would need to do. It also added a new exemption. So for those individuals who are Indians, urban Indians, California Indians, and other Indians who are eligible for Indian health services. I just want to peek and make sure that I don't get into what we were able to do because of a part of was in the budget language. The budget language, we were directed to use exemptions that the state had because we had some extras. And maybe you should take this part. So I'm like, I'm not gonna do you justice already. Extras isn't quite right.
The state fiscal 26 big bill directed the department to utilize its bank of discretionary exemptions through September 30th. That bank of exemptions goes away October 1st. That was a federal change. So we utilize those exemptions to exempt the folks who were losing exemptions or newly subject to the work requirement through September 30th. And we also were able to utilize those exemptions to make sure no one closed benefits in October. Serendipitously, this is complicated, but there's a 3-year clock that we have to follow that resets every 3 years, and it gives everyone 3 free new exemptions, 3 months of exemptions, and that happened on November 1st. So right now, those who have this new work requirement, who we haven't already identified another exemption, have 3 new free months that they can use and retain their food benefits. So that we've noticed every household that is subject to this change in the work requirement. We've made a phone call to every single person who's now subject to the work requirement. That's about 4,000 notices and phone calls. The hope, we also looked into our eligibility system. If we could identify another exemption that we knew about to the work requirement, we applied that. But the hope is that, the households got this notice. They may not understand it right away, but we're hoping that we can get in touch with them, and we're working with our community partners as well. Because while they have these 3 free months, we can work to identify an exemption if one is available, or find out and update our eligibility system whether they're meeting the work requirement. And we can even backdate that to November 1st if it's applicable, if we're getting in touch with them in, say, November or December or January. So it gives us a little bit more time to make sure folks don't close benefits for not meeting the work requirement.
And what kind of referrals do you make, like to folks who maybe have had difficulty finding employment? Do we refer folks to VR? Do we refer folks to the Department of Labor for their work resources? Or is it, you only talk about SNAP and, you're in, you're out, you have these things, but how does that work?
Great, no, that's a great question. During the interview, first we run a SNAP employment and training program. It's a federally required program that we work with a network of providers, including the Department of Labor. We work closely with Hireability, and Invest EAP is actually our case management source for employment and training. And that network is really skilled at reducing barriers and getting people connected to supports to gain employment or education. Our staff also have resources where they can refer folks to, and our staff are really skilled at applying exemptions. So maybe someone hopes to meet the work requirement, but they have a situation right now that means they can't meet the 80-hour per month work requirement. We have an exemption that the federal term is fitness for work. We don't love that term. So we've actually, working with Hunger Free Vermont, have tried to rebrand that to a personal obstacle or barrier. And what that exemption means is they can't currently meet that 80 hours per week because of a situation specific to them, but they hope to, so they can get that exemption from the work requirement for up to 1 year at a time. It depends on their situation while they work towards that.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Representative Noyes.
Do you have the staffing capacity to implement this work requirement monitoring and helping people?
So at this time, and I think some of it's gonna depend on the level of engagement. So we've notified everyone, as well as saying, like, we really have people end up with 4 months to be able to engage with us and to see, like, some folks might choose to not. And so I think it will be evolving. I would be happy to have that conversation, in maybe like midwinter. And I just wanted to, sorry, I jumped ahead, slide 11 outlines what Leslie was just saying. So sorry, the flow, I decided, sorry. No, here's me. I just thought it appeared nicer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brenda, go ahead, Representative Steady.
So out of 63,000 recipients, 4,000 have been identified as being able to work, or does that mean out of the 63,000 that some are already working?
We have many working families who receive 3 Squares Vermont. The 4,000, we did not have information in our system that they were eligible for another exemption or that they were currently meeting the work requirement, but it doesn't mean that they weren't either exempt or meeting. We're just trying to notify them to get in touch with us to let us know their current situation.
And do you have a number of the 63,000 recipients that are already working? Do you have a number?
I don't have that on top of my head.
Okay. Thanks.
So another change that happened, and I'm going to turn this one over to Leslie because this one is another one of those complex ones, is that the utility allowance had changed.
So there, previously before HR 1, well, let me back up. Three Squares Vermont benefit calculations are really complicated, and we factor in many variables, including income and deductions. A utility deduction calculation is part of what we call the shelter deduction. We used to be able to leverage a federal policy called Heat and Eat that allowed us to give everyone the maximum utility deduction, which gave them the maximum shelter deduction, which gave them the highest benefit that we could. HR 1 changed the ability to use this Heat and Eat connection. So now it's only available to households with an elderly or disabled member. So other households, we look to see if they pay for heating or cooling costs, we can give them that larger deduction. If they don't pay for heating or cooling costs, we look to see which utilities they actually pay for. So if they paid for 2 other utilities like electricity and water and sewer or trash, we could give them what we call like the medium-sized utility deduction. If they only pay for phone, we can give them the phone allowance. So we have been working really hard for everyone who calls us to find out who's losing this higher deduction. If we don't have information in our system that they pay for heating and cooling, we ask them, like, do you pay for any part of your heating or cooling costs? You don't even have to pay for the whole bill. And if so, we can update our system to give you this higher deduction. This is skipping ahead a little bit, but I think it makes sense. We implemented, so all of these fundamental policy changes to HR 1 that directly impact beneficiaries, the work requirements, the utility, and we're going to talk about non-citizen, they were all effective upon passage of HR 1, July 4th. The federal government expectation was that we implemented on July 5th. That was near impossible. So we've been implementing as soon as we could. Every October 1st, we get updated information from the federal government around, it's basically a COLA, cost of living increase, to the tables that we use to calculate the deductions that we're able to use, and all of those different like variables that go into the calculation. We implemented the utility changes when we implemented our October 1st cost of living adjustments. The good news was that fewer households than we anticipated were negatively impacted by this utility change. For the most part, Three Squares Vermont households all received a small increase in their benefit. There were about 2,600 that had a benefit decrease, and a lot of that was because of this utility change. And then a very small handful of households, I think 36, no longer qualified for Three Squares Vermont. But again, if they got a notice from us that said their case was closing, they could have called us and we would take that opportunity to review their utility information to see if that was what caused their closure.
Representative Donahue.
So I'm going to begin with an assumption that you can say is not accurate, and then that ties to the question. But I assume if somebody's renting a place and they don't have to pay utilities, it's because that's included in the rent, as opposed to they don't have any, it's free. Is there any way that can somehow be divided off from the rent in calculating to show the fact that they are in fact paying for heat?
We just really quickly identified like some of the like very nuanced ways that we have to apply this policy. And I'm happy to share some like frequently asked questions that we've developed for our staff, but there's a difference between heated renters or someone who's sharing in the rent and has a liability for some of the utilities. And we have to look at each case individually to see which scenario they fit into and whether they are allowed to have this utility deduction for Three Squares Vermont.
Representative Garofano.
2 questions. One, the 36 that you mentioned that are no longer qualifying for the benefits, are those being disqualified because of changes in HR 1, or are they are they not qualifying? Do you know why they're not qualifying?
That's a good question. I don't think I can say I know exactly why every case closed. Every October 1st, when we get all these updated cost of living tables and information from the federal government, we run our entire caseload through the eligibility system to see how it impacted their benefits. So when we did that, there are many different factors at play. Like some cases could have actually just not turned in recertification paperwork. Some it could be because of this utility allowance. Some could have income changes that we're applying when we're running everyone through the system. So I don't have, it's not, I can't say that everyone closed because of HR1.
I mean, I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Are you all tracking the administrative cost of how much more it is for state government to implement the changes of HR1? And then a follow-up to that is I understand that there may be some federal grants available to help pay for some of these administrative costs that the states are incurring to cover the changes in HR1. Is that on your radar at all?
Well, I can say this is a federal program and we're used to federal changes. I think this is the most sweeping change we've ever had to implement, but I mean, it is our job to implement federal policy. With respect to grants or other,
No, there was potentially one grant that the Agency of Digital Services had said that there was maybe something out there, but I haven't seen anything more about that. But if you have information, we welcome it, right? Because I think it is sometimes we're so busy trying to implement everything that to be able to see what else might be out there. So we're probably missing something. So please share. Welcome that. Excuse me. So another change that came about through HR1 was it limits the categories of non-citizens who are now eligible for SNAP or 3 Squares. So it removed eligibility for refugees and asylees. And then there's the list of who are eligible now. And again, we put this programming in place for October 1st. And we did there was 119 households who, who were impacted. Sorry, there's a breakdown. Is it 83? I should have these numbers.
no, you're close, 86.
86 households who had partial reduction. So that's telling us that there was, that's 33. Sorry. You go.
Too many numbers. Miranda and Leslie comedy hour. So we reviewed eligible non-citizen households before HR1. The good news is more than 500 households were not impacted by the changes in non-citizen eligibility. The bad news was there were 119 total that were impacted. 33 had a partial benefit decrease because one or more household members was no longer eligible, and then 86 households closed because they didn't meet the current non-citizen eligibility.
Do you know how many of the 86 were Afghan refugees with special immigration visa status?
Not the exact number, but it was a much smaller number of the 86.
And also kind of embedded in these changes. And so this isn't something that we had any control over, which has created some confusion. But the federal government updated the Thrifty Food Plan with the cost of living increase. So this is what Leslie was talking about. There's also a piece that says in this legislation that the Thrifty Food Plan really can't be increased for the next few years. So what we were able to implement that did help a fair amount of folks happen, but what we know is that the Thrifty Food Plan will be updated again for a couple of years.
And has that normally been updated annually? Have they changed the schedule, I guess, is my question.
There's generally cost of living increases, but it's the reevaluation of the plan, which it wasn't reevaluated. It's recently reevaluated a couple of years ago, but it hadn't been for decades.
Yeah.
And that's been a criticism of the SNAP program, that it doesn't reflect, what food actually costs. And so that reevaluation in any future years has to be cost neutral, which seems like illogical.
And that seems illogical, yeah.
Just
Yes, go ahead, Representative.
Remind me what the thrifty food plan is?
Yeah. It is, a market basket. So the federal government determines the thrifty food plan. And I think statisticians are doing all this work, but it's a market basket of the cost of food, for a very, low budget household. So if you were trying to buy the most nutrient dense, low cost food that you could to support your family, that's what the thrifty food plan represents. And it's a table of maximum benefits, SNAP benefits per household size. So that's the most any household could get is this table, which like for a household of one is $298. When we're doing the benefit calculation, we determine net income, or we look at income and deductions, and we take 30% of net income and subtract it from that number, the maximum number, because the expectation is that this is a supplemental program and households are expected to spend 30% of their own budget on food, and SNAP can supplement the rest. So the most a household of one could get is $298, household of four is $994, but generally households get less than that if they have any income.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear, and thank you, just made that point. That's up to 298. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that everybody gets that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just I'm going to encourage us to move along and because we're nearing on 9:45.
We're gonna skip 11 because we've already gone over that.
Yeah.
We just went over, I should have just kept, that, so now we're gonna pivot, completely, and we got notices, in October. I think we're up to a total of 4 notices from the USDA, informing us that we needed, that November benefits were, had to be suppressed. They couldn't go out. So we, have been incredibly busy working to suppress November benefits. So this was programming that we had to do. And I think as you all recall, we are an archaic, IT system. So it's not nimble. It's not something that can happen quickly. So we have been working on that. We are able to suppress benefits for November 1st. Our next, call to action there was, how do we unsuppress? We want to be able to do this as quickly as we can as soon as the federal government reopens, which I think we all are hoping will be really soon. And then yesterday, I presented a plan to the emergency board, which is that we will state fund the first 15 days of November. So we will be getting this message out to Vermonters. We also, just last week, started or had the ability and started using the technology to be able to do automated calls, just because we will properly notify people as well. So we will put notices in mail, but we know that's not going to reach people timely. So we are using automated calls. We're hoping to be able to use text functionality as well, because it's something brand new that had to be built. It's just taking us a little bit to evolve, but to be able to call all the Vermonters that receive benefits to let them know that there will be 15 days. We're hoping it will be on or around November 7th, that this benefit will be there. And we also were able to give the Vermont Food Bank $250,000, which they will be sending out to the cash out to local food shelves to be able to purchase more food. And we're working on communication around how to let Vermonters know that as well. Because it is one time, we don't want to set our food shelves up for not being able to meet needs later on, just knowing that they're so incredibly overwhelmed already. But that there is this resource, knowing that there are going to potentially be 7 days in the beginning of this month that people won't have access to food. So that is our good news, is that we will be able to support Vermonters. And then we have also agreed that there is an e-board meeting planned for November 13th. If the federal government does not reopen, that we would come back and discuss about what to do.
So I have had people ask me, so we're going to issue a benefit on or about the 7th for the full 15 days, but there'd be a delay. So what happens if federal government comes online, or lo and behold, they decide to use the reserve funds, all of which seems unlikely, but on November 10th. So people have asked me if folks would get a double benefit somehow, or what would happen in that case?
Yeah, so for example, so there is language in the motion that was passed yesterday. So the federal government is to open tomorrow. Then the benefit, the 15 days wouldn't go out, nor would the 250. Well, I might have to back up, because I think the 250,000 is moving already.
Yes, all right.
So like the benefit itself wouldn't go on, but if it was the 10th, the benefit goes out. And I think that is what we have been trying and had a lot of conversation around, is because that would be income. It is one time in nature, and we are allowed to have and jump in anytime where it's like, I don't quite get it right, but we are allowed to be able to exempt one-time, non-reoccurring benefits that households receive. And so that is what we would share with the federal government. You know, if they picked a case from this month, you know, and saw that there, that's what we would share, and we would have policies and procedures about what this money was and why we did it.
Okay, so just to restate that, to make sure that I'm understanding it, there actually is the possibility, because our systems aren't nuanced enough to be able to, you know, do this on a more nuanced way, I guess. So somebody could receive a benefit that, if the federal government reopens and it's before the 15-day period is over in November, then whatever prorated share of that 15-day cash benefit that came that came from Vermont dollars would be considered income. However, you can do a one-time exclusion for one-time cash payments. You can do an exclusion, so it would not affect their income calculation in the benefit. Is that right?
Got it.
I get it? Okay.
And we're hoping that the federal government will fully fund November SNAP benefits, but I think that's also.
Yeah. All right. Who knows? Who knows? Yes, go ahead.
Would it impact our error rate at all?
So it potentially could, if they said like, no, this couldn't be excluded income. It was counted, but I think that's where we're feeling confident that it's a one time, it's very specific, that it can be excluded. But yes, that was good pick up on the nuance of like we had to juggle.
Yeah, I think it's you know, I mean, I think you've laid the picture out that it's complicated, you know, when you hear in the news and you just talk about SNAP benefits, it just seems like, you know, okay. You know, write a check for whatever, $200 a month. It's not, you know, you're painting a clear picture about the complicated nature of the business. Any other questions before we wrap up with these witnesses for right now? Thank you both so much. We appreciate it.
Actually, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, may I ask one question? Director Wisdom, earlier talking about the error rate, if I understood correctly, said an underpayment is considered an error. Is that correct? So would the same be true for a non-payment? If someone was due a benefit and they did not receive it, because
We have two different kinds of error rates. We have payment error rates, which is solely underpayments and overpayments. Improperly closing a case or not approving their benefits is called a CAPER, and I'm lacking what that acronym stands for, but it basically means we improperly closed or denied. That does not go to the payment error rate.
And it's only the payment error rate that is impacting whether or not Vermont has to contribute towards the benefit.
Right.
Okay. All right. So thanks for asking that question, because we had understood that denying a benefit or closing a case was also an error rate. And it is an error rate, but not one that counts towards the payment error rate.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And
We'll see you back in a little bit.
Well.
Okay. Next, we're going to be hearing from the Food Security Director at Capstone Community Action and Executive Director at the Family Center of Washington County. You're both welcome to come up together, or if you want to come up separately, doesn't matter to me.
Hi, I'm Liz Sharp.
Liz, how you doing?
Good, how are you? Good.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Liz Sharp, and I am the Director of Community Economic Development and Food Security at Capstone Community Action. I've met a bunch of you here in previous testimonies. Thanks again for having us today to talk about the situation we're in right now. One of the programs I oversee at Capstone is our food shelf, and we are one of the largest food shelves in central Vermont. Like all of the other community action agencies, they also have food shelves as well. So my story is probably very similar to what their story is, but I'm just representing Capstone at this point, which is Washington, Orange, and Lamoille counties. I did submit just a letter to the committee. So I'll sort of be drawing from that letter, but really I'll just be kind of speaking from the experiences that I've seen over the last couple of weeks. We have definitely seen a really large increase in the number of people who haven't used our food shelf visiting us in the last couple of days in particular. We've been short-staffed, so I've actually been overseeing the shelf and taking people's applications in and hearing their stories of why they're visiting us. Some of my stories are in here. So you're saying new applications?
New applications,
Okay.
yeah, new applications, for folks who are anticipating not having their food stamp benefit on the 1st. So I've seen families come in, I've seen, a lot of, folks who are working folks who rely on 3 squares, but know that, they're not gonna have their benefit right away. And they're stocking up. It's been, hearing some of the stories, and I'll be kind of candid here. It can be frustrating working in the food shelf, right? There's a lot of people who have a lot of needs. There's a lot of very poor people who use our food shelf. And sometimes I look at people and I say, why aren't you working? You're a young man. Why aren't you? Well, yesterday I had this young couple come in with 3 kids. And the woman tells me that she's a bus driver for the schools. And she's 37 years old and she had a heart attack last week. So she can no longer ride the bus. She can no longer drive the bus. And so not only can she not do her job, but she also is not going to have her 3 squares benefit right away. And she's got 3 kids. And so those are the things that I don't always ask people, right? I just, sometimes you make assumptions about who uses food shelves. And you know what? It's all walks of life. Another guy that came in yesterday, he came up to me and I didn't understand what he was saying. And I finally got out of him, they had a brain injury from serving in Iraq. And he gets $1,000 a month as his retirement. And he's not going to be getting his food stamps. So I had never met him before. He doesn't use our food shelf, but he needed to use it now. I was speaking with a woman in the lobby, and the story's in here. Those 2 stories are not in here. She was probably my age, who suffers from seizures, and she's on special medication that requires her to eat special food. And she has to eat 3 meals a day. And she said her food stamp benefit is used to buy the special food that she needs to eat so that medication works properly. Food shelves don't have that special food. We don't have fresh fruits. We don't have oranges and pears, and we have apples because we're from Vermont, right? But we don't have some of the things that people need, and they rely on their food stamp benefit to help them. This problem, in the next, maybe it's just a week, before people get their benefits, but we don't know, right? We don't know how long this is going to go on. And it's just, it is the answer that the state comes in and solves all the problems? Probably not, because I don't think we can, right? And I know that the charitable food system cannot replace $12.5 million worth of food benefits.
I know Barry, for example, has a couple of churches that are going to be open tomorrow for their food shelves. And I imagine the rest of Vermont is doing some similar things in their communities, so that folks have food available to them. But food stamps have been something, Three Squares have been something that we've had for many years, and people have, normal, regular people, working, non-working, a lot of disabled people. We have a lot of disabled people who use our shelf, a lot of older people. They rely on it. It's a part of their income. If you were to see the incomes that most people who come into our food shelf have, $900 in a Social Security benefit. Some retirees making maybe $1,100 a month, and that's all they have in Social Security. So having the food shelf, having the Three Squares benefit as well as the fuel assistance goes a really long way to making these people have a dignified life in their homes. The Community Action Network right now is, aside from all this, we're also facing, federal cuts. One of our core foundational grants, the Community Services Block Grant, we don't have that grant yet, and that helps fund my food shelf. That grant has thankfully been put back in by both the federal House and Senate, but because we're in a shutdown and because there's no budget, we don't have that money. And I believe some of the community action agencies may be at risk of having to lay people off because they just don't have the reserves. They rely on this money coming in. I believe NECA has already sort of reduced some of its hours on its food shelf because of that. We also lost some federal grants for our food shelf, which one was the Local Foods Procurement Assistance Program that gave us anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000, where literally 100% of the money went to the farmers. Nothing went to Capstone. We just administered it, and we bought local foods from 3 area farms. That money is gone. The Emergency Food and Shelter Program funding has been paused indefinitely. That helps reimburse us for our food. So really, at this point, we're relying on, the philanthropic dollars to help us fund the food shelf. We spend, maybe $120,000 on food, but we get about $500,000 worth of food. And that's not even the grocery store prices. That's like sort of the subsidized prices, right? So I don't know what the calculation would be for a grocery store price, but it's, we as community action agencies and as sort of leads in, working with folks with low incomes, we're seeing this not just with the SNAP cut, but with all the other federal cuts that are affecting us as well. Weatherization, Head Start, for example. We have our grant. It begins in August, so Capstone's okay. But the other, theirs have a November start time, so they're not okay right now. So there's a lot happening as a result of the things happening on a federal level. But just drilling down to the food security issues, it has sort of a snowball effect, right? If you don't have your federal funding, you can't run your food shelf. And if you lose this funding, you can't buy the food to run the food shelf. So, we really do appreciate the efforts that the state is making to come in and, fill this gap. But really, we should be outraged, and we should be really forcing the federal government to realize that this is not good for our state, and it's not good for any of the other states either. So that's basically my testimony, to just let you know what it's like on the ground with the folks visiting our food shelf. If you have any questions?
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate that. Questions from anybody here? Appreciate the fact that you and your fellow community action agencies and the other food partners around the state are there for people. I know in my community, we've had 3 food drives already, and people have been really quite generous, more generous than you might imagine. And every bit of that's being used. Every bit of that's being used at our local, Waterbury Commons Market. So, I think that, you know, the efforts that you're making and to hear sort of the pocket, you know, that you have in Barry, in particular is interesting to me. The numbers there are much different than the.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, for SNAP benefits, it's around 10% for Vermont, and in Barry, it's 26%. So it's more than double, the number of people who live in poverty and the number of people who receive, Three Squares benefits. So it's definitely, it's a big impact on these families to not have this benefit.
And thank you for highlighting the overall issues in terms of cash flow and the community services block grant. And those are funds that flow directly to community action, not through state government. And, you know, so delays in those, you know, have big impacts depending upon the cash flow in days of cash on hand for different agencies. Is there a question?
No, she's recording me. Could you ask her to shut it off, please? Esme is recording me
Okay.
because I had to check my, because I have something going on at home.
Social media.
I
Anyway,
had to
it's
check.
disrespectful.
Okay.
Can
Okay.
you ask her to stop recording me, please?
So let's take a brief break right now.
Thank you. Thank you very
Lauren,
much.
you're welcome.